Negro Den, a journey of faith, hope, and courage. There is a real place that was formerly known as Negro Den. It is a place of natural beauty, wonder, and seclusion, hidden from ordinary view. In 1990, I learned about Negro Den during my stay with a small Amish Mennonite community in the Cumberland Mountains of Tennessee. Legend says that Negro Den served as a hideaway for enslaved people escaping north in search of freedom. It was said to be a hidden place of refuge and rest. You will not find Negro Den on modern maps, nor is it recorded in written history. Its existence has been passed down only through oral tradition and local legend. Today, the site is located on privately owned property. Some people doubt or even outright deny its existence. Yet, a small stream known as Negro Den Creek continues to flow quietly through the mountaintop, serving as a lingering reminder of the place remembered as Negro Den and the oral history surrounding it. High atop the Cumberland Plateau in the mountains of Tennessee, Negro Den Creek carves its way through the woods and surrounding farmlands. This area is home to a small Amish Mennonite community that was established in 1969. As you travel by car, you will see this narrow creek cross the large circular road a few times. Two sisters named Kathy and Norma were the first to tell me about Negro Den. They excitedly urged me to visit the waterfalls on the Hostetler's property before I left visiting the community. At the time, I believed I would be staying there for only 3 weeks. Kathy and Norma told me that Negro Den was a hidden place featuring a beautiful waterfall and a secluded cave where, according to local legend, runaway slaves hid while escaping north to freedom. During my stay in the small community, many other families also encouraged me to visit the beautiful waterfalls on the Hostetler's property. They explained, after the community discovered the waterfalls, they searched extensively to learn its history, but to no avail. No maps acknowledged the site's existence, and no written historical information could be found. After much searching, the elders finally found answers from an Air Force map. This prompted a visit to the Air Force for more answers. The elders learned the site's name and the oral history associated with it. The Air Force had taken numerous aerial photographs of Negro Den. They had very detailed maps and written documents of its oral history. Kathy and Norma told me about a heavy metal hook that had been driven into the face of the cliff, and the black smoke stains that still remained on the rock wall and footpath. It was believed that runaway slaves had hung a cooking pot from the hook to prepare their meals. They also told me there was a hidden cave directly behind the waterfall. According to local tradition, the only way to reach the den was through a secret path concealed from view. More than a year had passed before we had the opportunity to visit the Hostetlers. On a bright early spring day, after church, my 7-year-old daughter, my 1-year-old son, and I were to visit the Hostetlers and see Negro Den. As we drove from church to the Hostetlers' home, I noticed the familiar narrow creek crossing the road, just as I had seen it many times before. Esther and Titus warmly welcomed us into their home. Esther had prepared a delicious, hearty, yet humble meal. The conversation was warm, pleasant, and engaging. After dinner, it was finally time to go see the waterfalls. Before we left, Esther brought out a baby carrier she had borrowed from one of the families in the community. She felt our journey would be safer and easier if my 1-year-old son rode in the carrier. Esther helped me put on the carrier and carefully secured my son in it, before we began our trek to the waterfalls. We walked through the farmland, stopping along the way to see the silo, farm equipment, garden, and finally, the animals in the barn. A sow had recently given birth to a litter of piglets. From there, we continued toward a thin woodland filled with leafless trees and scattered bushes. Shortly after entering the woods, we came upon the small creek, gently flowing over a shallow bed of sandstone. It appeared to be only a few inches deep and approximately 2 feet wide. Esther calmly led the way. There was a sense of excitement and adventure in the air. My 7-year-old daughter followed playfully behind us, happily hopping back and forth across the narrow creek. We continued our eagerly anticipated journey through the woods for another 5 to 10 minutes. Before long, the trees and bushes began to thin. Then we heard the gentle sound of falling water in the distance. As we continued on, the sound of rushing water grew louder. Finally, Esther stopped near one of the last remaining trees and quietly announced that we had arrived at the waterfalls. I was completely unprepared for what I saw next. Just a few feet ahead of us, the earth completely disappeared. A vast blue sky stretched out before us. We were standing on top of an extremely high cliff. It felt as though we were standing in the sky. An immense landscape lay both before us and far below us. We could see for miles and miles. I turned to look at the little creek we had followed. It flowed cheerfully over the edge of the cliff, plunging gracefully many feet below. As I stepped forward to see where it was going, I watched the water crash onto what appeared to be a smooth rock ledge protruding out from the cliffside many feet below. At the center of the ledge was a beautiful circular depression, a natural rock basin or pool, carved entirely by nature over countless years. The water flowed out from the opposite end of the pool, forming a second, equally beautiful waterfall that appeared to be the same length as the first. This second waterfall gradually disappeared out of sight through a sloping landscape full of tall, rounded, cylindrical boulders standing closely together, like towering pillars. The landscape continued until individual features could no longer be distinguished. From our bird's-eye view, countless miles of hazy blue and gray layers stretched toward the distant horizon. I was absolutely amazed. As I stood at that dizzying height, I instinctively stepped back from the edge. Esther remained calm, standing comfortably nearby, as she excitedly told us how the waterfalls had been discovered by the children of the previous owners, while exploring what would later become the Hostetler's property. She explained that the falls had been measured using a very long rope with a rock tied to the end. We stood there for a while, quietly taking in the beauty, wonder, and vastness of it all. Then Esther gently led us away from the edge of the cliff. We walked about 200 feet to the east. As we walked eastward, Esther told us we were heading toward the secret entrance down to the den. I was very glad we were walking away from being too close to the rim of the cliff. Esther explained that the secret entrance had been discovered several months after the children of the property's previous owners had found the waterfalls. As we followed Esther, we came to an area scattered with small boulders about 1 or 2 feet high, along with a few scattered bushes. Esther stopped and told us that the hidden entrance was right there. All I could see were a couple of boulders and a few bushes. I had no idea what was about to happen next. Esther walked on between 2 small boulders. As we followed right behind her, suddenly the ground beneath us descended sharply. Rock walls rose on both sides as we continued single file down this hidden, dark, narrow passage. We were completely hidden from view from the surface we had just left. A narrow strip of blue sky overhead provided our only light. Dry leaves crunched beneath our feet as we carefully continued onward. I was especially thankful it was early spring and that the snakes were still hibernating. As we descended, Esther warned us to watch our footing carefully near the end of the trail. Ahead of us was a very sharp, hairpin turn. A narrow rock ledge was our only footing, and a very deep crevice between a tall boulder lay ahead. We would have to cross the narrow footing before entering the den. Esther crossed first, carefully, being sure-footed. Then my daughter crossed with the help of Esther's steady outstretched hand. Finally, it was my turn, with my son securely strapped to my back. We all crossed the narrow ledge and the deep crevice safely. What a relief! After crossing the hairpin turn and the dangerous rock ledge, we found ourselves inside Negro Den. The narrow rock trail widened. We were finally standing on secure footing, though still dreadfully high in this deep and vast cove. We stood there in silent amazement, taking in the incredible view from inside the den. From this vantage point, the view was breathtaking and accessible. We could see both waterfalls in their entirety. The natural rock pool seemed to rest majestically on its seemingly impossible perch, protruding over the steep drop of the cliffside. Its shimmering overflow spilled out, creating the lower falls, then disappearing many feet below into the deep expanse filled with tall, enormous boulders. We stood there for a while, quietly taking it all in. What an awesome sight! My heart filled with the stillness and magnificence of this place. A profound sense of awe came over me, and I felt deeply connected to its legend and oral history. It appeared as a perfect refuge, free from harm, secluded and hidden. To our left, the huge boulders below stood straight and strong, like a city of skyscrapers descending the steep mountainside. I marveled at the immense view from the backside of our mountain top. How magnificent! The entire place seemed to echo with untold stories of courage, hope, and gratitude from those who, according to oral history, had risked it all and found refuge here on their way to freedom. Farther ahead on our rock pathway, we saw a heavy metal hook driven into the rock cliffside wall. Black smoke stains marked the cliff walls above the hook and on the stone pathway below it, just as Kathy and Norma had described. As we continued forward, I reached out and gently ran my fingers across the smoke stains, almost expecting some of the soot to rub away. Instead, I was surprised to discover that the stain was permanently embedded in the rock wall. As I stand there, I am overwhelmed by what this place is. I realize that I had just touched history. I wonder what it was like to be running for your life, in the hope of finding freedom from a terribly cruel system. I can imagine the sorrows and joys this place once held. I can imagine and feel the hopes and dreams of being free. I wondered if the travelers packed cornmeal and beans from their last stop, or if they lived off wild blueberries and game. How long did they stay here on their way to freedom? Esther began to lead us towards the open cave. We walked into the cave and stood directly behind the falls. The roar of the waterfalls was so loud that we could barely hear one another speak. The cave we are in is about 25 feet in length, 10 to 15 feet deep, and 10 to 12 feet above our heads. There is protection here from both rain and heat in this perfectly dry, shaded area. As we silently watch from this spectacular view, I can easily imagine weary travelers taking shelter here, completely hidden from the rim of the cliff. We watch the water crashing down, filling the large circular rock pool in front of us. The rock pool appears to be about 20 feet across and no more than 5 feet deep at its center. I have no explanation why it looks perfectly round. It has a gorgeous rim of what looks like smooth sandstone, as if made on a potter's wheel. I imagine weary travelers sitting on the rim, washing their clothes, or jumping in to get a bath. The view was absolutely magnificent. We could see directly south into the descending landscape of tall boulders standing close together. I found myself wondering what it would have been like to bathe in the pool or make a bed inside the cave. Later, I asked Esther if she had ever entered the pool. She smiled and said, "No. I was afraid I might be swept over the other side." I completely understood. Esther led us further on to the opposite side where the cave structure ended. We found ourselves on another protruding, shelf-like rock path. A row of tall, enormous boulders lined up side by side at the end of this path. A space of 2 or 3 feet was between each boulder. As the mountainside descended, the drop between each boulder increased. The last boulder appeared to be at least 80 feet tall. The drop was frighteningly deep. Esther and my daughter skipped over the first 2 boulders. I followed, jumping onto the first boulder, but, being frightened, could not go further. When Esther and my daughter reached the 3rd boulder, my little girl had to stop, being frightened of the height and the increasing depth below. Esther continued excitedly on like a forest deer to the 4th boulder. She looked out over the vast expanse, pointing and telling us whose property lay to the east and whose property stretched to the west. Esther then pointed southward to the far horizon, stating that you could see all the way into Alabama or Georgia. I marveled at her lack of fear and her oneness with nature as she stood fearless standing on that boulder, no wider than 6 feet. I found myself thinking about how differently people raised in the country experience the natural world compared with those raised in the city. For me, standing at such heights was very intimidating. Yet, the immense height, deepening drops, and limited surface space seemed to have no frightening effect on Esther, who was in her early 40s. She appeared completely at peace in God's beautiful, natural world. As we made our way back, many thoughts ran through my head of all the things we saw at Negro Den. I thought about its concealed entrance, the dangerous crevice, and the narrow footing, the sheltering cave behind the waterfalls, and the metal hook pounded into the cliff wall, the cool, abundant water, and the overwhelming beauty of this place. This still and quiet place seemed to resonate with songs of refuge and victory, of untold stories. I couldn't help but wonder if heaven smiled upon us as we explored this remarkable place called Negro Den. It almost seemed surreal. I could imagine the many prayers of thanks that were offered in this place. The joys felt as the travelers found this beautiful place just as it was told to them by those who had taken the journey and returned in secret. It must have felt like heaven on earth for those escaping the horrors of slavery. A quiet realization settled over me. This truly was a secret place, a hidden place, a place that told of hope, faith, survival, pursuit of freedom, and God's loving provision. Negro Den is more than a natural wonder on the Hostetler's property. It is a historical place, a sacred place, a reminder of God's provision in the midst of profound injustice. I want my people to know about Negro Den, be inspired by its mere existence, and to experience some of the wonder I felt while there. I am truly grateful for the opportunity to share this remarkable place with you.